Just a little bit about Sami. He was born in the United States. He got his education, early education in Palestine, in Bethlehem, in Jerusalem, and he also came to the United States and studied here. He is a graduate of the Peace and Conflict Resolution Department of the American University School of International Service in Washington, D.C. He is an author, a well-known inspirational speaker in many venues around the world. Sami, this is very, very short, but you are most welcome here. Let's give hands for Sami.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As my Uncle Alex was introducing me and saying that he called me to come here, I wonder if I would have said no to him, what it would have been like. I don't think I ever said no to you. Yeah, I usually start by saying I'm happy to be here, but I'm just saying I'm honored to be here. I'm really honored to be with you at this time, to be invited to share my heart, to share with you what's going on in the land that many of you have been in, many of you love, many of you follow teachings of amazing prophets and people who have walked that land. Individuals who taught us that peace and justice is the way forward. Individuals who said, may peace prevail on earth. And I come to you from a land that is crying, that is in deep pain. Alex also said that, what kind of a speaker am I? I'm an inspirational speaker. I don't know how much inspiration I have for you today, in all honesty. I want to share a little bit of my own story of growing up and share a little bit of what's happening in the land. And maybe at some point for all of us to continue to brainstorm together on what can we do. What can we do to bring an end to the atrocities that we are facing? Atrocities that I have to be very honest in saying I never ever imagined that I would see my people suffer from. Growing up and living under occupation, restrictions, confinement, curfews, every form of harassment that you could imagine, I never thought that this is a point that we would reach. Every time you think this is the worst it can get, and now we're going to be able to move forward, in the last few years we have just seen it get worse and worse and worse. To the news that's coming out today, and who knows how true or how not true, but the plan to expel people from Gaza is becoming more realistic. They've been talking about it, but now it might actually happen. And who knows what tomorrow will bring and what the next day will bring. But to jump a little bit to my story and why I do the work that I do. I grew up in a family that is a refugee family. In 1948, my father's family, my Uncle Alex's family, suffered from the Nakba, the catastrophe that the Palestinians faced. And sadly, that history still remains, continuous till this day. During the 1948 war, the father figure of the family was killed in that war. He was killed trying to protect his family. He wasn't involved in combat. He was only trying to protect his wife, my grandmother, and her 7 children. And he was shot by a sniper. My grandmother, the siblings, how old were you at that time? 2 years old. They buried their father in the courtyard of the house. A few days later, the Jewish forces came and kicked the family out of their home, and they became refugees. And one thing that is very, very important that we keep reminding ourselves as a family was that the neighborhood that they grew up in was a neighborhood where Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together in peace. This is our history that certain ideologies and entity tried to erase. That Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together in peace. And I think it was actually the Jewish neighbors that saved the family from being killed on that day that they were evicted from their home. And the family became refugees. My grandmother always insisted, and every time I give a talk, I have to honor her, because we wouldn't be here as a family if it wasn't for her. That as a family, we will never seek revenge and retaliation for what happened to us. This is how she understood her faith as a Christian. Sadly, the great majority of Christians do not understand that part. And not only do we not seek revenge and retaliation, but we proactively seek peace and reconciliation with those who did this to us. And so we could also just ignore the situation and say, no, we don't want to retaliate, and we will move on with our life and trying to regroup and trying to rebuild. But she said, no. You turn back to those who did the injustice to you and seek peace and reconciliation with them. That's the seed that my grandmother planted in my Uncle Alex, my father, and the whole family, and us as grandchildren. On my mother's side, her family comes from Gaza, from the Gaza Strip. My mother was born in the Gaza Strip. And until the war, my uncle, my aunt, my cousins lived in Gaza. Gaza is a place that is very, very dear to our hearts. We used to go there before, well, the last time I was there was in 1998, but until that day, we used to go there every weekend to go to the beach, eat with the family, swim at the beach, and come back home. When October 7th hit, when the news came out, that was the day after I met many of you here, on October 6th when we met, the group. The first thing I realized was that this is going to be a disaster. Many people were wondering what's going to happen. Many people were wondering what is happening. The first thing I did was call my cousin up in Gaza. His name is Ramzi. And I said, Ramzi, find a way to get out, to get your father out, to get my aunt out, to get my cousins. This is going to be damaging. Because one of the policies that the Israeli government uses towards us as Palestinians, you may have heard this term, it's called collective punishment. All the people get punished for the acts of a few. And there is no differentiation between old and young, between Christian and Muslim, between man and woman. Everybody gets punished as a response to the act of a few. And as the news was coming out from what is happening on the borders of Gaza and what Hamas was doing there and many other Palestinians engaged in, and the violence and the death and the destruction that was happening on that day, it was very, very clear. My cousin couldn't get out. They couldn't leave. Immediately the borders were shut down. And it took us many, many months and lots of effort to be able to get some of them out. Initially, they moved from Gaza City to refugee camps that were built on the Rafah border, including an 88-year-old uncle and an aunt who is blind and deaf. And then they moved to another camp when that camp was bombed. And this is just in the early months of after October. Close to a year into the war, we were able to get them out into Egypt, where they are now. And we were able to get them out because we as a family were very lucky and privileged to have friends to raise funds. And we had to pay $6,000 for each person to get out from Gaza. Many others couldn't afford that. And so they're in Cairo now. And we are so thankful because we know If they didn't leave, they wouldn't be with us. Growing up, I grew under occupation. I grew under the Israeli military occupation. I grew up seeing soldiers and settlers harass us as Palestinians and harass my father as a child. At the same time, I grew up with this message of seek peace and reconciliation with them. And it was very, very challenging. How do you make peace with the people that are harassing you, that are violent to you, that are mocking you? And this is what I saw as a child happen to my father by Israeli soldiers who were maybe just a few years older than me. And I remember at one point even asking my father, what do you mean, make peace with them? And look how they just treated us. But one of the great influences on my life was another uncle of mine. Maybe some of you have heard of him or known him or heard him. His name is Mubarak Awad. Mubarak, there's a smile there. Mubarak in the early 80s established a center in Jerusalem called the Palestinian Center for the Study of Nonviolence. He had studied Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement in the US, Gandhi and the liberation movement in India. And as a Palestinian, he came and said, as Palestinians, we have the right to resist occupation. We have the right to self-determination, and we could do that through nonviolence. And I remember the first action I went with him was when I was 12 years old. And we were asked to plant trees in a land that was going to be confiscated by settlers. And I remember the instructions very well as a 12-year-old child. My uncle saying that we are here to plant trees. No matter what the army does, no matter what the settlers do, you are here to plant trees. And it was the first time that I actually met Israeli activists, Israeli peace activists. Because growing up, again, the experience is soldiers and settlers who were violent to us. Israeli activists who were with us, standing with us as Palestinians in our right to defend our land. And as we were planting the trees, the soldiers came and the settlers came. And they were uprooting the trees that we were planting. And I could only remember, plant the tree, plant the tree. And I planted my tree. And then we were asked to leave. And the settlers came the next day and uprooted all the trees that we planted and took the land. But that action as a 12-year-old child changed my life. It was so empowering to do something. And I began to understand this is what nonviolence is about. Nonviolence is about doing. It's about engaging. It's about empowering. It's about not giving up. It's about knowing that every person can do something and there is no excuse. Those who engage in armed resistance are a certain group of people. They carry weapons. Many of us don't. I've never carried a weapon in my life. They shoot, they kill, they destroy. But when it comes to nonviolence, there is no excuse to engage. And that was very, very powerful for me. A few years later, the Israeli army arrested my uncle, Mubarak. And because of how active he was in leading the nonviolence movement in Palestine, he was put on trial and he was deported. He was kicked out of the land. Never allowed to return and live there as a resident or a citizen of that land. And that was a turning point in my life as well. Why did they see in him a threat? They actually labeled him a threat to the national security of Israel. This is what they talk about when they label Iran or Hezbollah or even Hamas a threat to the national security. And a non-violent activist who was working with Israelis and Palestinians was seen as a threat. And his deportation was my commitment to trying to answer that question. As my uncle said, I continued my studies in this field. And in 1998, I went back to my homeland, to Bethlehem. And I started an organization called Holy Land Trust. Our aim was strengthening communities for the future. During a time of a peace process that was happening at that time, the Oslo peace process, we felt that if we don't have the voice of the community, not just the voice of the leaders, but the voice of the community engaged and active in self-determination, this peace was not going to last. And sadly, the peace failed. In the year 2000, the Second Intifada happened. That was very, very violent. But for us, the commitment was still to engage in nonviolence. At a certain point in my journey, I began to ask questions. And one question was, why did the peace process fail? Another question is, what is really, really happening in the land? Is it just two nations fighting over the land and not agreeing on boundaries and borders between them, as many people try to depict it? Was it just failure in negotiation tactics that we weren't able to achieve peace? And part of my journey, coming from my faith background, was to also begin to ask, what would Jesus do in a situation like this, especially during that time in the Second Intifada? So it was a spiritual awakening, and at the same time, trying to really understand what is happening. And during that time, as I was engaged in these questions, I was invited to go to a pilgrimage. You know, many of you come to the Holy Land for pilgrimage. Those of us in the Holy Land have to go somewhere else for pilgrimage. And it was a weird invitation, but I said yes to it. And that pilgrimage was to go on a spiritual pilgrimage in the death camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau in Poland, to bear witness to the Holocaust and what happened there. As a Palestinian, and I say this as most Palestinians, we don't deny the Holocaust because we claim to be the victims of the most victimized people. So as victimized as they were, we're even more of the victim. Or we say they're doing to us what happened to them. And I have to be very honest here. In the past, when I said we're doing to us what happened to them, in the past I would say, but not as extreme as what happened to them. Now I cannot say that, in all honesty. And I went to Auschwitz, and in Auschwitz I began to understand one of the key core reasons why we are in the situation we are in. And this is how trauma affects us as human beings. How it shapes our identity, how it shapes our behavior, how it shapes how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive others. In Auschwitz, I heard Israeli teachers tell Israeli children, their 13, 14-year-old children, that if they are not strong, if they are not committed to the state, if they don't join the army, the same thing will happen to them as what happened to their ancestors or their grandparents in Auschwitz. And they were told that the Palestinians will do to you what the Nazis did to your ancestors. Indoctrination into an ideology of fear, into an ideology of mistrust. How can you achieve peace when there is no trust? And one of the things I began to realize at that point, and I was saying it for many, many years, again, never expecting it to be at this level, that if you bring absolute fear and absolute power together, you create absolute disaster. The Israeli society is a society that is embedded in an ideology of fear that continues to be manipulated by the establishment, and a society that is completely embedded in an ideology of absolute power over others. And this combination is a disaster for us as Palestinians, but I would even say for Israelis and for Jews as well. And so a big part of my journey began to understand how we need to engage in trauma healing, in collective trauma healing work. And surprisingly, understanding that a lot of what Jesus did was healing. You know, Jesus, if he did two major things, it's preaching and healing. He kind of jumped between those. He walked through the Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and healing their illnesses and proclaiming the kingdom. So the three things that he was doing continuously. What is healing? For me, healing is liberating. When Jesus was healing, he wasn't healing to show off his messianic powers. He was healing because he was liberating those who were traumatized from the constraints that would not allow them to live their life the way God intends that life to be lived. And so a big part of the journey that I began engaging in was, how do we heal the traumas of our communities as Palestinians and Israelis? And I received a lot of pushback. A lot of pushback from Palestinians. How dare you talk about healing the traumas of our oppressor when they are doing this to us, when we are the ones that need healing and liberation? And it wasn't easy. How dare you talk about the healing of a rapist who continues to rape a woman under his control? That was what I was accused of. But I really believe that if we don't do this, as I said before, it will be an absolute disaster. On October 7th, one of the first statements made by Israeli officials and leaders as a response to what Hamas did. Remember when we told you they'll do to us what the Nazis did to us? That was one of the first things. And there was this immediate shutting down of the consciousness of the Israeli Jewish community. Now it was all about survival, and that Hamas was going to commit the genocide against them exactly the same way as the Nazis did. And in no way do I defend Hamas and their actions. But it became very, very clear that there was a second agenda. And this agenda was to destroy. This agenda was to take over. This agenda was to ethnically cleanse. And the voices of Israeli politicians, I hope you all heard them, were very, very strong in calling for genocide of the Palestinians. So where are we now? In addition to what's happening in Gaza, many of you are aware of also what's happening in the West Bank. Our biggest fear in the West Bank is that the same thing is going to happen to us as what is happening in Gaza. This genocidal machine by the Israeli government is not going to stop in Gaza. There has never been an Israeli government that recognized the rights of the Palestinians to establish a state as part of the negotiations. You may have heard that they're negotiating, they're sitting with us, they're talking with us, but never, ever was there any recognition of the rights of the Palestinians to establish a state. And for many of us, it felt like it was a game that they were playing just to save time till they wanted to do what they wanted to do. Israeli settlements have continued at a faster pace now than any time before. Violence towards Palestinians by settlers and by soldiers is unprecedented. The fear and the terror that Palestinians live on a daily basis in the West Bank is something, as I said, we've never experienced before. In the town of Beit Jala where I live, we are worried that settlers will come in and commit violent acts against us. And they have done this to Christian villages, to Muslim villages, without remorse, without thinking, without stopping. Palestinian activists are being killed. A young leader named Aude, many of you have maybe heard, from al Khair, an activist, a friend, a person that I trained in nonviolence. Sometimes he would even encourage me when I felt weak. Beautiful soul was killed a few weeks ago. And the brutality of the system was to keep his body from burial until the family agreed to the conditions of the Israeli army. 10 days the family wasn't able to even mourn and grieve the loss of Aude and bury him in an honorable way until they agreed to the conditions of the army, which was to bury him outside of the traditional burial site in the village, far away, 1.5 kilometers away, and that there will be no signs of honoring him. When we went to give our condolences to the family and to the community, it was a tent. And usually in these tents where martyrs are honored, they have at least a picture of them. They have flags, they have slogans, they have speeches given to him in his honor. We had to go in quietly and sit in as soldiers were watching us to see every move, waiting for something to happen so that they would raid his memorial site. And then we had to leave in silence and quiet. The humiliation that is happening to us as Palestinians, as I said, it's unprecedented. Those of us who are committed to nonviolence still stay committed to nonviolence. But we are also very worried and seeing that many leaders of the nonviolent movement are being detained, are being arrested, are being harassed by the Israeli army itself. After October 7th, within a few weeks, there was about 50 Palestinian nonviolent activists from the different villages who were just picked out from their homes and arrested without anything. They had not done anything. There wasn't even a protest movement. As I said, everybody was worried. And many of them spent 6 months in prison. And the prison conditions are the worst than anything we've ever seen. People are leaving sick, malnutritioned, broken in their spirit, losing 40, 50 pounds, gaining 10 years due to the continuous violence and harassment they face in prisons. And these are the non-violent ones. I can't even imagine those who they accuse of being violent, what they're facing. And people are being killed in prisons. One of the things that we continue to engage in and fully believe as Palestinians, and this is where our nonviolence lies today, is the concept of sumud. Sumud means steadfastness. Sumud means resiliency. Sumud means that we will stay on our land, our ancestral land, our land that is connected to our indigenous culture. Sumud means staying in the land of the olive tree, staying in the land of the rivers and the mountains that we lived in and grew up in. Sumud has connected us as Palestinians to something greater than our political aspirations. It has connected us to what it means to be a nation, a First Nations people. Sumud has invited us to look deeply into our existence as Palestinians and to look into our own faults to our own people and ask, what can we do? One of the projects I am very proud to be part of and engaged in is something called the Palestinian Councils. Many of you know the council circles. And so now we're starting to create Palestinian councils, circles where Palestinians are meeting, talking to each other, sharing with each other, grieving with each other, connecting, uniting, healing our issues between us. And we're holding these councils in different parts of the West Bank and Jerusalem and in 1948 territory, which is now Israel, but also holding these councils in Jordan for Palestinians who live in the diaspora. And next month I'll be in Portugal holding council for Palestinians who live in Portugal as well. And then there's one we're going to do in Abu Dhabi. And so for me, the optimism that in the midst of the destruction that we are facing, in the midst of the genocide that we are facing and continue to face, the little hope that exists for us as Palestinians in the land is an awakening into what it means to be Palestinian. Not Fatah, not Hamas, not this, not that, but what it means to be part of a people's group. The second level of our hope, which is even greater for me, is in you. We are not able to organize demonstrations and protests and sit-ins and boycott campaigns and different activities in the land. But you have no idea the hope that activists around the world are bringing to the Palestinian people in the West Bank and Gaza. Knowing the movement, knowing the growing desire to learn what's happening, knowing that people are standing for truth without fear of being labeled. And this is something that you are doing. And it's really helping many, many Palestinians survive and not feel they are in isolation. And my encouragement to you is to continue. I know it is not easy because the forces that be in this country, at the political level, at the economic level, at the level of media, and sadly, the level of many, many, many churches is a force that is trying to put us down. Churches that promote hatred, promote resentment, promote racism, promote theologies that go beyond falsehood, and I would even say evil. And so my encouragement to you is to continue the work of solidarity with the Palestinian community, to continue to advocate for the rights of Palestinians to self-determination and liberation, to end the genocide, to end the starvation, to end the siege, to call for a real movement for peace and justice to manifest in the land where we as Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together for centuries in peace. And at the same time, to understand that the greatest battle that we have is here, in your communities, in your neighborhoods, towards those churches that are advocating for the genocide. I want to be honest, and my uncle is a pastor sitting here. In the past, we used to look in churches like this and still label them as our brothers and sisters in Christ. I don't know if I could do that again.
You can say sisters and brothers now.
Yeah. Jesus warned us. Jesus actually warned us of those people. And the wolves have come out in sheep's clothing. And they are in our neighborhoods. They are in the church next to us. And just the fact that they say the name Jesus doesn't mean anything. Just the fact that they grab a Bible and shout racist slurs towards different ethnic and racial groups in this country, towards the migrants that want to come here, towards those who practice different ways of living in their gender than other than they do, doesn't at all make them part of our family. And I think the greatest resistance in this country needs to be towards those people. I say this as a Palestinian, and I also say this as an American, that this is the greatest danger that we have to face. And so our battle is a long battle. And I really, really believe that what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank and Palestine, not because of the uniqueness of who we are as a people. We are a messed up people like any other people as Palestinians. But it is waking us up to the reality of the consciousness that has been prevailing on this planet for a very long time. A consciousness of separation, a consciousness of duality, a consciousness of the us and the them, a consciousness that we are better than others. And this goes fully against the teachings of the kingdom that Jesus was inviting us into. Jesus was inviting us into love, into compassion, into care, into humbleness. Jesus was inviting us into purity of the heart, of seeing the stranger as equal. And it's time we reclaim those teachings without fear. And it is not easy. It is not easy. Because even when we claim such beautiful teachings, such honorable teachings, the system will still see us as a threat. Because you are creating alternatives to the system instead of creating allegiance to the system itself, which is what it wants. Once we begin to shift the needle away from the system will react, and will react violently. But Jesus was very, very clear in this. In the Beatitudes, he finishes with, "Blessed are the peacemakers." But then he doesn't really finish with that one. There's one that comes after that, right? What is it?
Blessed are you when they persecute you.
You will be persecuted. You will be persecuted. And I really believe the greatest invitation that Jesus invited us is to welcome the persecution that we will receive. If you are a true peacemaker, you will be persecuted. If you are not persecuted, I invite you to check. Now, it doesn't mean you have to seek persecution or jump into the fire, but to understand that you will be rejected for following his teachings. It is very, very simple. And he says, follow me. And follow me means follow his path. And his path was a path where he experienced persecution to the point of death. Hopefully we will not even go that far, but we will be rejected. And the moment that you get rejected for working for peace and justice in Palestine, Israel, or for addressing the injustices that you face in your community, what comes after that? What comes after Jesus says you will be persecuted? Celebrate. Celebrate. Celebrate and rejoice. It doesn't say like you're persecuted, go into victimization and sorrow and poor me and oh me. Once you experience persecution, you are commanded to celebrate and rejoice, for this is what they did to the prophets before you. The prophetic calling for us is to be peacemakers. The messianic calling for us is to be peacemakers. And with this is my words of encouragement to you. We're done?
I wonder if we can take a few questions.
Yes.
Quickly. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you again for coming, and thank you again for the work you're doing. Thank you. Yes, please, it's to you. Thank you. Thank you, please. Thank you. Yes.
I just wanted to say something about the district.
Can you please stand up so people can hear you?
I want to say that
Thank you so much for your encouragement, and I totally support everything you said that we can do in the States. My question is there any way that we can do something to what's happening in Israel? Is there any format to protest that from the United States? I keep envisioning I'm writing letters to Netanyahu, et cetera, myself.
Like a
Is there
Joel?
any way to get that information to them?
You want to answer this? Yeah, one thing I would encourage you to do is to follow and to support a lot of the Israeli and American Jewish peace groups and justice groups, and to encourage them into what's happening. There's an awakening within Israeli society now. For the longest time, there were protests that were calling to just release the hostages in Gaza and still continue the war. But now there is a growing movement of Israelis that are saying the word genocide, that are being harassed, that are being arrested by the Israeli military and police. And so I would encourage you, Standing Together, for example, is one group that search them, send them notes, send them messages, telling them, from Eugene, we just want to tell you that we support what you're doing. And to continue the pressure in the US on government. You might not realize it, but it is happening. It is happening. Things are shifting and changing here in the US, and it's a lot because of the pressure that you are creating and putting on your government. And at one point, these officials that have been bought by AIPAC and bought by Christian Zionists and so on are going to face elections, and they're going to be very, very careful the next round of what they say and how you say, and it's going to be because of people like you. So continue the pressure on that.
Yeah, and I would say, while we are here, there are petitions out there, one for Merkley and one for Wyden. And so please sign these petitions. And if you are a pastor, I'd be very glad to share with you from my computer to your computer the petition so that you can take it to your church and have also some people in your church sign it. I hope before Sami leaves, we'll have at least 1,000 people sign the petitions to Merkley and to Ron Wyden. And I want to say also, those of you who feel like giving a donation, there will be a basket there to give a donation, to put a donation in. And some of this money will go to Gaza to help feed the hungry and buy medicine for those who are sick in Gaza. So, but continue to ask questions.
Sami, you talked about at one time in your life that you were asking the question of, is this really just Palestine against Israel? And later in your discussion, you talked about the churches being the greatest threat in your mind to this genocide situation. I'm hoping you can elaborate more on the central role that the church is playing from your perspective.
This is a whole lecture that Alex can give, much better than me, and it's way longer. But our biggest challenge, I think, as followers of Christ, is a theology called dispensationalism, and in-days theology that believes that the modern state of Israel, the political nation state of Israel, is a fulfillment of prophecy, and therefore Israel needs to be supported blindly no matter what Israel does. As we have seen many politicians, Lindsey Graham just a few days ago actually made this statement: if we pull the plug on Israel, God will pull the plug on us. And this for me is false prophecy, false theology. It does not deny the right of Israel to exist, but Israel is a nation like all nations and has to adhere to international law, has to adhere to values of human rights and precedent. And these churches are pushing a theology that is advocating for and actually supporting the ethnic cleansing and the killing of Palestinians. Because part of the journey is that all Jews will return to the land, and it has to be purity in its Jewishness. The temple will be rebuilt, and then Armageddon will happen, which will destroy Judaism itself, by the way. And so a big part of that theology is that it is, in addition to being the biggest anti-Palestinian movement in the US, it is also the biggest anti-Semitic movement in the US. And then there is no biblical precedent to a theology like this that is 100 and 150 years old at max, when the whole church history has never taught such a theology. So it's a very modern theology that is embedded in theology of fear and destruction and hatred to usher in the second coming of Christ, and it's very destructive to all of us.
And yeah, we have with us Dr. Fred Martin. He wrote a book dealing with Christian Zionism, and his book is out there if any are interested in buying his book.
I wanted to just interject and let folks know that if you're interested in having more of these conversations, we have the Stronger Together Interfaith Potluck, which we'll be hosting here at FCC on September 14th. And this is an organization run by Interfaith Clergy United in partnership with Temple Beth Israel and Rabbi Ruhi. It's a great place to come and show up, especially since we'll be hosting. And we're really wrestling with some of these questions.
And I'll be there tomorrow as well.
Sammy will be there. Okay.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Couple more questions. I think we should probably wrap.
I'm wondering if you could say anything about the role of our collective toxic shame for the things we have not done that we should have done.
Wow. I really don't know why, but the US is usually on the last caboose, you call it, of the train when it comes to justice issues. And I think this is what we experience in South Africa, this is what we experience in many, many countries where the US is always the last to get on the bandwagon. And I think this is our greatest shame as Americans. Instead of leading and knowing that the US is a global powerhouse, instead of leading what they claim to do, which is bringing democracy and human rights and into the world, instead of what they usually do, which is colonialism and manipulation and destruction of resources and indigenous communities, that the values that exist in the United States, that I as an American am so proud of as well, that these should be the values that lead us in how we relate internationally in our politics. And I think this is the greatest shame for us as Americans that we need to address. And again, from what I'm seeing in the people's movement in the US, there is the awakening that is happening. It is happening. I was in San Francisco dropping my daughter off at university, and it brought me to tears in seeing, as we were driving in San Francisco in different areas and neighborhoods, seeing Palestinian flags hanging from people's homes, seeing graffiti of Palestinians, olive trees and orange trees, and Palestinians in their traditional clothes, all graffitis all over the wars. And I was driving with somebody, it's really interesting how the flags of Ukraine were raised very, very quickly in the United States, which I agree with, but how long it took to begin to raise the Palestinian flags. But my optimism that it is happening, and very thankful for that.
witness has been waiting back here for a bit.
Thank you so much for being here, for what you're presenting to us. Anywhere we can have an impact, like notifying our representatives in Washington that we're strictly opposed to giving money for this genocide.
Can I just make a quick follow-up to that comment? If there's anyone here that is a PERS retiree, our pension is financing all kinds of companies, industries, Israeli-related businesses that are financing the genocide. So if you are not wanting to receive a pension check that is derived from the global arms industry that is making the bombs that are being dropped on Gaza, then come see me. And also if you just have your own investments, IRAs, check them out very closely, because most are invested in the genocide in one way or another.
Yeah, I have to agree with that there's this worldwide military cabal, military-industrial cabal that is making a profit on the genocide, and that's why they're not doing anything about it, as Francesca Albanese said. But I want to ask you about social media. Do you think it helps? I mean, I tweet Netanyahu, and I don't know that it gets to him, but I tell him that he's doing a better job of destroying Israel than Hamas ever did.
Yeah.
And I just want to know, and also Ben and I made a little Instagram video saying that we were going to fast for Gaza for a day, and it went viral. It's got 2 million views now, and it's encouraging people. They say, oh, thank you for your support for Palestine. I mean, it's giving them some hope.
Good. Well, thank you for answering your question then.
Does it work? Do you think it works?
It's working. It's working, and this is why there's a whole system that has been created within the Israeli military establishment to attack, to try to respond negatively, to create alternatives in the whole social media scene. We're gonna end now.
I think Jenny had one. Let's
Okay.
take one last one from Jenny.
Okay, and then I'll give some
That'd
comment.
be great. Thank you.
I would like, thank you for who you are, what you do. We support you.
Thank you.
You said at one point that after the funeral, you asked yourself, why? Why is this happening? What is this conflict really about? Did you come up with an answer?
Yeah. Yeah, as I said, and I'll add more to say that this conflict is about fear. It's about trauma. It's about unhealed wounds of the past. It's about the Jewish community that has suffered for thousands of years. It's about the lack of real healing and reparations at the core sense of what happened after the Second World War II and the Holocaust. It's about a victim that received so much power that they become the victimizer of other people instead of looking at the healing that they need to go engage in to heal their own wounds from the pain that they faced. It's about us as Palestinians living the Nakba from 1948 that continues until this day. And many of us not even acknowledging that the Nakba continues. It's about failure of leadership on all levels, on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side, to achieve the peace and to have the pressure needed during Oslo to push them to say, no, you will achieve this peace, instead of playing around and having Israeli politicians affect the discourse of what happened in the negotiations. And our Palestinian leaders being very weak to even say, no, we don't negotiate if you're going to continue like this. And so, but for me, it is embedded in the collective psychology of our two peoples that are living deep fear and deep pain and deep mistrust. And one is stronger than the other, and therefore they are engaging in killing the other. But for us to really engage in peace work, we have to address these issues. We can't just go back to the negotiating table. We have to really look into how do we heal the wounds of our communities. Okay, I want to end. I've never done this before, but I'm going to plug something. So in a few days, my book is coming out, and it's called The Sacred Awakening. It is a book where I look into the teachings of Jesus when it comes to what he really, really called us to do. What does it mean to live the kingdom on earth today as it is in heaven? And so for several years, and especially actually since the war started, being in this question, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? How would Jesus behave? And it's a book where I look into the teachings of Jesus, the life of Jesus, I would say very, very independent of Christianity. And just as a rabbi who had amazing wisdom and teaching. And asking what does it mean to be a peacemaker? And how do we achieve becoming peacemakers? And what do peacemakers do? And so this book is going to come out on the 21st. Excited and a little worried. But more important, thank you to the church. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for the encouragement that I leave with going back home after meeting you. And we are in this together. So let's continue. And one thing very important, our job is not to demonize and dehumanize anyone. Christ called us to love the enemy. And we do what we do out of a heart of Christ's love. We will never put down, we will never hate anybody. We stop and resist the actions and bring healing to those who are doing the actions. But our heart is a heart of love. Thank you.
Would you mind just close us in a prayer together? If you could at least, or whatever you feel moved.